Hey everyone, I'm Matt and welcome to the Good Trouble Show. Today we have Mr. Sean Cahill joining us, but first do us a solid and hit that thumbs up and subscribe button and leave a comment. We always want to know what you think about our show. And if you're a podcast fan, we are on all podcasting platforms. Just search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. Finally, your financial support enables us to bring you this show with exceptional guests. You can chip in by becoming a Patreon supporter. Go to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And of course, Super Chats are open and are a great way to show your financial support. We very much appreciate it. Okay, now on with the show. If you haven't been tracking this, the subject of UAPs, otherwise known as UFOs, is being taken seriously by Congress. Recent revelations by whistleblower David Grush that the United States government is in possession of crashed UFOs set off alarm bells in Congress. Last Friday, Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator Mike Rounds introduced a bipartisan bill on UFOs for the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act that, get this, was 64 pages long. I mean, that's freaking crazy. Now, while this phenomenon has been going on probably thousands of years, if not longer, it was an event that occurred on the USS Nimitz in 2004 that set things in motion. Our next guest, actually, I don't think he was on the Nimitz, I miswrote that, was part of that whole event. Please welcome retired U.S. Naval Chief Master at Arms, Sean Cahill. Did I get all of that right?
You did. Very good, man.
All right, good. Thanks for being here. How are things on the lovely West Coast?
Really good, really good. Few thunderstorms today, but other than that, it's actually welcome. We need the rain.
Oh man, it's I can tell you it's hot as hell here in Los Angeles. That is for sure. I'm ready for fall already. So, wow, man, we're living in some pretty crazy times.
Yeah, it's even for those of us who have been working on this for quite a while, it still has me reeling. Some of the language and some of the things that are now set on the historical record, so to speak. We have a long road ahead of us. I think, as evidenced by the way the vote went down, it's not a completely bipartisan issue at the moment. It seems a little split. I think that we could probably dig into that. But I never thought, even as a child, that we would get to this spot in this way. I'm quite proud of the way that we're handling this finally, that we're utilizing our justice system, our due process, and our Congress to finally do this the proper way, not in a leak fashion and not in a bombshell fashion, but in the way that we built this country through exposing and the truth and getting down to the brass tacks and making decisions together.
Now, before we really dig into all of this, we have a lot of viewers that are new to the UAP topic and perhaps new to your story. So give us a little bit of what your naval background was, your naval career.
Sure. I spent 20 years in the United States Navy. I retired as a Chief Master at Arms at the rank of Chief Petty Officer. I spent the first few years of my career doing some interesting and odd jobs in and around Guam at a submarine refit site or refit station. But following that, I spent the remainder of my career in law enforcement and anti-terrorism. In 2004, I was stationed on board the USS Princeton. And shortly after coming on board and making Chief Petty Officer, when the initiation process was done, we had our next workups, which happened to be around November of 2004. And that leads us up to 14 November, where the infamous Tic Tac video was taken.
We're going to get into that here in a second, but I wanted to pop up this still here. So this is before the whole Tic Tac incident. When was this photo?
Let's see, which photo?
You may not be able to see it at our end. Sorry about that. I'll pop away from that. It was one of your, I think one of your official officer photos. So let's dig into the whole 2004 thing. So tell us how that all started, leading up to when Commander Fravor encountered this thing.
Sure. I had been standing watch on the bridge for this workup and in subsequent workups and deployments. As it began as a favor to my navigator. A lot of folks who are in the Navy would find it weird that there was a cop on the bridge. There normally isn't one. But we needed the extra manpower up there, so I'd been standing watch. And during the course of that week of November 14th, I was receiving phone calls from Senior Chief Kevin Day down in the Combat Information Center. And at various times, he was directing me to change the course of the ship or send my lookouts out on the decks to scan the sky for air contacts. And as the week progressed, it became apparent that these were anomalous contacts, that we were sending radar techs around to check, make sure the radar was working properly after a recent upgrade. Lots of communication was going back and forth between the Nimitz and the USS Princeton. And finally, Senior Chief Day convinced Captain Red Smith that this was an event, an actual real object that was performing these maneuvers they were seeing on radar, and convinced the captain to contact Nimitz and, as the air defense commander, to order a sortie of aircraft out to the area. As we know from the reports, and I'll let Commander Fravor's reports speak for themselves, but he and Commander Dietrich and other pilots were sortied out to the area and made contact with what they described as a 30-foot-long Tic Tac shaped object that appeared to bounce around the airspace around them. It seemed intelligently controlled. It was also allegedly over an area of roiling water, or boiling, so to speak, roughly in the size of a 747. I will say that a lot of people do confuse that with shape. I don't believe he's ever said the shape of a 747, just roughly the size.
The size.
Yes. But again, I'll leave that up to Commander Fravor. But basically what happened was we were chasing these things around, trying to determine whether or not they were real or not. And once the gun camera footage came back, it was astounding. An interesting note is that the night before, Kevin had called me, and it was a last plaintive attempt of him to get me to go out and really look around with the guys and find this. I hadn't been taking it super seriously. I'd been giving the orders to the fellas, but I hadn't gone out myself and really looked too hard. And so I'd went out on the port side bridge wing, where my port side watchstander was, and reiterated to him what we were doing, and he started scanning with the what we call the big eyes, a very large set of binoculars that are bolted to the deck. And he started scanning as far as he could and then forward, and I started scanning from the port beam, which is just to your left, all the way to the port bow, which is all the way forward. And as I scanned forward to the port bow at about 2,000 feet, at about 45-degree angle, there were 5 to 7 lights in the sky. And I say 5 to 7 because I couldn't really get an accurate count because they were all moving. And they were moving towards the center of their formation. As each one got there to that center, it blinked out. It was a very strange thing to see. It didn't mimic any aircraft flares or any other kind of phenomena I'd witnessed over the course of my years at sea.
So the quality of the light was unlike anything you had ever seen. Like, you know, how a helicopter landing light would look like one thing and a navigation light would look like something else. So the quality of it was completely different.
Correct. And as the conning officer and junior officer of the deck, I was aware of all aircraft in the sky, everything on radar. Part of my duties was to check the radar as I made my rounds around the bridge of the ship and ordered course corrections to the helm. So I was quite aware that there was no aircraft in our vicinity, and these lights were approximately the size and luminosity of Venus.
Wow. Yeah, so they were really pretty big here, and I think we have a clip of the video. Now, you may not be able to see it here, but essentially the black and white footage from the gun camera. Mm-hmm. That of course was one of the bits of footage that Lou and Mellon got out. Was this confiscated? So when Fravor lands, was this confiscated? Because I would imagine there was other data as well besides just the video. What happened, like after he landed? What occurred, and then what did you sort of hear about it after the fact?
So I can tell you that from on board Princeton, we received that video via email from the operations officer on board. She carbon copied all of the chief petty officers and all of the the officers on board, the folks we call the khakis, because we all wear khaki. Back then only we wore khaki uniforms. So all the khakis had gotten a copy of it. We were aware of all of the chain of communication between the ops officers on both the ships. And so on board Princeton, we were astounded. Those of us in the Chief's Mess who viewed the video together had differing opinions. Some of us were pretty sure we had just witnessed a Roswell-worthy event, as I called it at the time. Others were a little more skeptical. As time went by, my thoughts on it changed, because based on the reaction of my commanding officer and how lightly he took it, without providing scorn, I had jumped to the conclusion that this was just a DARPA program, that we were confident and we had nothing to worry about. And as an anti-terrorism officer and a chief, I was more concerned with the safety of the ship and the crew. So in the end, I kind of wrote it off until 2017, when it was apparent that it wasn't. Now, looking back, Petty Officer Gary Voorhees states that, on board Princeton, states that there were officials that came on board, required him to sign an NDA under the captain's authority, and retrieved the radar tapes. Over the years, we found that various pieces of data are missing. The deck logs are missing from the USS Princeton for that time. The watch bills are not archived. And so, as far as on board USS Nimitz, I can't say for certain what occurred, since I wasn't there. And frankly, most of the information that I would know would be third hand. I did receive an interesting third-party story from a former shipmate of mine, someone that I had served at the at North Island Police Department with. And when I returned, I went over to the department to get some supplies that I needed for my new command. I knew that I had ordered a lot before I left, and I figured they could lend me some police tape and a few other things I needed. And when I got there, he pulled me aside and asked me if something weird had happened when I was out on the Princeton recently. And I said, yes, it did. What are you talking about? And he had told me that his spouse had been ordered to sequester the pilot, or one of the folks had seen that the pilots were sequestered in their room for a period of time until someone came on board to debrief them. Now, as I say, it's hearsay, it's third-party information. But I found it interesting right afterward that the event on board Nimitz had obviously spread enough through the crew to hit the spouse network, as we call it.
One of the things that I had heard was that when Fravor, and I'm curious if you encountered any of this, that once this became common knowledge among the crew, there was a lot of sort of poking fun and, green aliens, all that kind of stuff. How pervasive was that? Did that also happen on your ship?
I think most folks poked a little fun at it when it would come, it would come up in conversation. Someone would bring it up and, out of curiosity, not usually out of judgment, and ask what other people's opinions are. And at some point, someone would usually pipe up with the usual stigmatic nonsense. I don't blame the folks. There was no information coming back, and I think a lot of people have an emotional response to deny these things, because they are very strange. They do challenge our paradigms. So we had a little bit of ridicule, but for me, I never encountered anything that affected my career or offended me, or went outside the realms of normal conversation, in my opinion.
So, following this, were there with the remainder of your naval career, were there any other encounters, rumors, things that you had heard from other deployments, or was that really your only experience? And obviously it was a really big one, but was there anything that occurred subsequent to that while on deployment?
So that was the only thing I've ever encountered while in an official status in the military, or while deployed. I can't say that I haven't seen things while out. I've seen other things while in uniform, but at my home. So that, by definition, I was actually still wearing my uniform when I had a interesting experience 5 months following the Tic Tac event. That consisted of a very, very large black triangle outside the scope of the known technology I'm aware of, or any of the programs I'm aware of, here in the vicinity of San Diego over my home, moving in a westerly direction. I've spoken about it on a few other podcasts. I find it interesting how close it was to the Tic Tac incident. But no, I've never encountered anything else in an official manner while in uniform or on active duty.
So Sean, I would love to hear a little bit more about, in a little more detail, the things that you've encountered in your personal life, because obviously this goes far beyond what you experienced on on the naval side of things.
Like a lot of people, when I retired from the Navy, I had to kind of figure out who I was again. I didn't turn right back and sit at the same desk I was at, like a lot of us do, or do the same job. I wanted to try something different after I retired. I also found that I have a 10% rating on my disability for PTSD and anxiety, and I spent time after I retired, working through that, figuring out what the origin of those things were, and learning strategies. And one of those things was meditation. I was lucky enough before this all went public to have had a few years learning and teaching meditation. And so it brought me a peace of mind and a way to look at these experiences in a different way. After 2004, I actually didn't go the route that a lot of people go. I didn't become spiritual following 2004. If nothing else, I became perhaps less spiritual and more materialistic. I'd had a lot of lofty ideas and possible beliefs and things I was curious about, but when it seemed like this was not the immediately the exotic event that I thought, because I very naively trusted the chain of command, the Department of Defense, the United States government to carry on the moral authority I felt behind our oath and other things all the way up, and always be the good guys. We know that's not always the case. So I was quite naive back then. But basically what happened for me, to put it in very simple terms, was that after 2004 and after filming a couple of shows and getting to know a lot of people and talking about this subject constantly and then working on it, I was asked by some friends to sit down and really catalog all of the strange things I've seen or experienced in my life. And I'd realized after doing that I had really written most of those things off. Just given them all an easy excuse, well, that was weird, or it must have been a balloon, or it must have been this. And I started making phone calls, calling folks that I went to high school with, guys that I was in the band with that had been around for some of these memories I had. When their recollections were different than mine, it bothered me. And when in fact their recollections were more ufological than mine, it bothered me even more.
Oop, think we might have lost him. Hold on one second.
No problem.
Oh, there you go. Oh, looks like you're back. Okay, cool. Sorry about that.
No worries. I'll back up just a little bit. I was asked to write everything weird that I'd witnessed or seen down, and after I'd done so, it became really apparent to me that what we call the phenomena and the different ways that it manifests in people's lives, or the different ways, I should say, that it's perceived by people, was something that it seemed like I had been experiencing throughout the entirety of my life, and I have experienced since. Once I acknowledged that, it became really hard to look it in the eye sometimes. I went back to therapy. It was one of the things that was bothering me the most, towards as I matured and got closer to my 50s. But 5 years of research taught me that there are millions of cases like mine. That there are thousands that have been in books and been recounted by others. But the fact is that we are a group of 8 billion people that has been experiencing these various aspects of whatever this is throughout our history. And it doesn't surprise me that it bothers a lot of people and challenges them emotionally. It's been a wild ride for me to accept these things. At the end of the day, probably the most complicated aspect is assigning meaning. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of that going around. And we've got the government that is now tiptoeing up to the idea that aspects of the government have been more aware of this phenomenon, that have been tracking it longer, that may have a better understanding for all of us as to what it is. I think for a lot of people like me, that's going to give a lot of clarity to the difference between emotional or analytical overlay of an experience and what the brain assigns to it versus what may have really happened. I don't take all of my experiences at a UFO face value. They're aberrations in an otherwise normal life that I've been trying to understand. I have some suspicions that a lot of this is wrapped up perceptionally based on brainwave activity, internal state, how self-aware a person is and how aware of their environment around them are. Because it would seem like the technology that is being studied with this phenomenon is operating at a higher, the simplest way to put it is at a higher level, whether we want to say at a higher dimensional level, a higher vibrational level,
right,
or just utilizing technology that's at an energetic level where they're able to achieve things that we're not able to achieve. This does seem to be a mix of technology and consciousness way down the road. So a lifetime of experiences has led me to believe that this is most definitely something that needs to be studied widely. We need to find a way to overcome the stigma and make it so some of our minds out there who aren't conceptually there yet can still work on it, because that's what science is about. The Higgs boson existed in math for years and didn't exist in reality until we finally were able to produce it at CERN. The fact is this is a true phenomenon that has been studied. We have to study it in the open now. We have to find the math behind it.
Other than the sort of military implications of, let's say we do have recovered craft, if you were to venture to guess what non-military reason there would be for the government to cover this up and not be honest with the American people, what do you think that would be?
I think that it's going to come down to the way that this technology per se, or this phenomenon, however we want to refer to it, interacts with human consciousness and perception. And the obvious fact that anyone studying this over a long period of time was going to realize that there were means of manipulation being employed in the perception of the people that were witnesses of these events. So it's my opinion that over the course of 80 years, the various aspects of how we would have sought to weaponize this technology or reverse engineer it if we'd had pieces of it, or even observationally reverse engineer it, we're going to find a lot of sticky fingers over the course of 80 years. I think industry, the military, government, and the private sector are going to have a lot to answer for, and I think that many of them are going to be reticent for being held responsible for the sins of the father per se. But the fact is I think in the next few years, the willingness of those involved to come forward and to explain to us what happened and how we got here today is really gonna pave the way for how we go forward.
Now, I'd love to dig in a little bit more on some of your other experiences. So what was the black, because I think this is something that not a lot of people know about you, the black triangle, was that really kind of the most significant thing you would say that you encountered? Were there others that you would like to talk about that maybe some folks are not quite aware of?
Black triangle is probably the easiest, because I think it's something that a lot of us can wrap our head around, and I think a lot of folks can take an easy exit and assume that it was just a misrepresentation on my part, or perhaps a program I wasn't aware of. But the fact is this will, in some people's eyes, take a hit on my credibility. But I'm willing to admit
Understood.
it, because the fact is these need to be studied. I've witnessed what other people would call poltergeist activity. In fact, the very day that I had cataloged all of those experiences on a whiteboard in my garage, I was quite emotional after looking at all of them, and I wasn't happy. I'm feeling it again right now. I wasn't happy at that moment acknowledging that this has been going on for my whole life. I didn't want the attention, whether negative or positive, that comes with that. But I also knew that the person that I am was that eventually I would talk about it. I came into our kitchen and was leaning against the countertop and facing kind of towards the sink to the right. And my wife noticed that I was upset and came in and gave me a hug and put her head on my chest and was looking over to the right, and she said, "What's wrong?" And I was holding on to her pretty tight because I was crying. And I explained to her that I'd written down everything I could remember, going all the way back to very early childhood. All of these different anomalous experiences, or just kind of sat down and thought, let's remember all our weird memories. And I was upset, and we watched, I say we watched because we were facing it, we watched a cereal bowl basically pop off of the countertop up over what's our spaghetti pot, or our big soup pot that we use. And there was a big popping noise, and it landed in the sink amongst the other dishes, and we both saw it in broad daylight and have zero explanation for it. That's a recent event that's not UFO related, but it was incredibly strange. It seemed energetic. My wife asked me what that was, and I said, I tried to placate her at that moment. I said, in this moment, it's probably just whatever my intent is, I don't know, hon. I tried to pull some stuff out of books and things that I'd read. But I can go back to childhood, to memories that don't make sense. There's a very early one in my youth involving the building of a very large wooden swing set overnight, and that same night, allegedly, my sister came to, or not allegedly, but my sister came to my room to keep me in my room so I wouldn't see Santa Claus. And the boys were supposed to be on the roof running around with jingle bells, and we heard footsteps on our roof of our home. And there were all these things involved with that evening that don't seem right. It's the weirdest thing that I have ever encountered in my life, is the dichotomy between how violently she needed me to not see Santa Claus and the lengths that she was willing to go to. We ended up in the floor in a headlock, me in a headlock basically, and I had to be 5 or 6. And I remember going to sleep in tears, wanting to see Santa Claus and hearing the reindeer on the roof and everything. It's such a silly story in retrospect. But if I jump to an event that occurred shortly after high school, where myself and 2 friends were together driving up the hill towards my sister's home where I lived. On the mountain in the back is Lick Observatory, James Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton near San Jose, California. And my recollection was that we saw a very large green meteor that looked maybe the size of a quarter held out at arm's length, in kind of an oval shape, moving down from right to left and spitting out these, the only way I can describe it is Buck Rogers cartoon sparks out of the back. I know what you mean. And I've seen plenty of meteors in my life, especially being out at sea. I've seen some really glorious large bolides enter the atmosphere. It didn't seem like a normal meteor. But this is where, it gets weirder for me, is that, again, my recollection is that nothing really strange happened, that we got to the top of the hill and turned off and went to my sister's house and wrote songs for the band that night. We had the house to ourselves. The parents were out of town. As I said, when I started cataloging all these weird things in my life, I called up the guy that was driving the car, and in my recollection, it was just he and I. And when I asked him about it, he explained a great deal and then kind of stopped talking to me. So I made another phone call, because during that conversation, he told me that our other friend was in the back seat the whole time. And I had no recollection of that either. Wow, okay. When I called the guy in the back seat, what the story that came out from the 2 of them was that we had seen this thing cross the sky, that I was adamant that it was a UFO, mm-hmm. and that we, pardon me for laughing, because I don't have the memory of that, and that I compelled the guys to drive over into the valley and up Mount Hamilton to Lick Observatory, where this thing had gone. They claimed that we arrived there, and that I got out of the car, and that there were these orbs, and they were freaked out, and they stayed in the car, and eventually we went home. And I'm making it very vague, not going into the details of it, because they're not. I don't want folks looking these guys up. They're not their stories to tell. Understood. Or not my stories to tell. But I don't have those memories. and they don't feel that they have a lifetime of interaction with the phenomenon. That's when it gets down to it, we can spend, and we should spend, a lot of time on radar tapes and on gun camera footage and on photographs and evidence hopefully collected by sensor data in orbit and other sensor suites here on the ground. But we also do have to start talking to the people. Whatever this is, it's going on for a lot of folks. All of us are presented with our social media and television entertainment aspect of how those folks want to tell us what it is. But between you and I can't find a continuity amongst any of those in origin, meaning, moral structure, history, or anything like that. There's too many stories on the table for me. So I know it's strange for a lot of people to go directly from the nuts and bolts to the consciousness side of it. But it's just, I think it's highly important that we start having these conversations, because science has caught up with the double slit experiment being updated and things like that. That the conscious observer is the driver of experience in this universe, and that without the conscious observer, the experience may not even occur. Time, as far as the math says, is all occurring at the same time, at the same moment. That all time, the time is not linear as we're perceiving it. It truly seems like something else has figured out some of these fundamental aspects of our universe. Now, whether they're utilizing them to help us, harm us, or in a completely neutral fashion, I don't know. Like a lot of people, I think they would have taken over if they wanted to and could. In law enforcement, we talk about things like opportunity, intent, and capability are the things that need to be present before law enforcement can utilize a firearm. But it's well placed to say that we may be dealing with not an adversary per se, but we may be dealing with an other that may have opportunity and intent but not capability. It may have capability and intent but not opportunity, etc. So the fact is this phenomenon remains cloaked from our perceptions. It's not on the front page. We don't understand it. It doesn't land and speak to us in a way that we can carry on with other people that they'll believe us. So it's high time that we as a species rallied and studied this together.
I definitely agree. It's interesting. So I had never had anything happen my entire life until I started looking into this subject, and all of a sudden, orbs. You and I had spoken about this before. It appeared, I think it's a total of 5 times above the home, and then also had the bizarre poltergeist type stuff that, again, I'd never had anything like that. And before I really began looking into the UAP thing, I never knew there was any sort of correlation, but that correlation is very common, right? It's sort of the co-location of it.
It's come to be known amongst a lot of circles as the hitchhiker effect. For a lot of people, it seems that there can be an event that some people can be present at. The event gets discussed, and that discussion seems to, it almost seems infectious at times. I have to say that it almost seems, and this will throw a lot of people off, but we have to be courageous in the way we're willing to explain this. But it almost seems like there is an energetic, viral aspect to it, not necessarily negative, but something that does go around based on these heavy conversations some of us have. And that in itself is something that we've all begun to discuss. You and I have discussed it. You and I both have, various pieces of photographic or video evidence that for us, it's very important because we were present, or it's our environment. We understand it differently than another observer might. And we're also we're understanding that other people are immediately going to look and begin trying to come up with rational explanations. I'm the first person that wants to come up with a rational explanation for what I see in my local environment that's unexplained.
Of course.
But then again, that photographic evidence, it can immediately be dismissed in most cases. Something that I had seen recently after a very poignant confluence of synchronicities. And I sent you the pictures, actually, because you and I were having conversations trying to lead up to our interview. I can't prove what that was. I just know that at that very moment in my consciousness, for me to stop and look straight up in an otherwise empty sky and to see a light the size of Venus that I watched for 2 minutes and then began taking photographs and video of as it moved away to the west, doesn't fit the profile of anything I understand. I have a drone. I actually worked. This makes me laugh when I bring it up, but you can call me a balloon subject matter expert because I worked at a party store for a couple of years and used to fill up those huge garlands of balloons and filled up Mylar balloons and had to put Stay-Flow and all this other stuff in them.
Wow. Okay.
So I've released lots of balloons, know how they look when they go away, and being out to sea here on the West Coast, we end up seeing all the balloons that people let go all land in generally the same spot. It's pretty gross. It's this huge patch of crap that circles out here off the coast. But so when I see a silver round object in a broad daylight hanging, thousands of feet over my head, I assume it's a balloon. I assume it's an aircraft, a drone, any other number of prosaic things. But in the course of watching it, it gives up no evidence that it is. What am I left with? You and I both know I'm not the only person that's seeing this. Detractors will like to say that it's strange that a person involved in this investigation is seeing it. No, it's not. I wouldn't be here otherwise. I'm not here for my acumen as an amazing detective. I'm here because I was witness to strange things, and I've studied them for 5 years, and I work with other people who study them. It's becoming. It's getting to the point too, and I have to say this, where we have to rally as a community together. We have to come up with our own guidelines, our own policing system, what we're going to accept. But if we keep waiting for the government to discover what's happening with everybody else, I think it's gonna pass us by. I think we have to rally as a community and find ways to really get this message out together, to share more together. Twitter is obviously a very toxic space. I don't have the same views on anonymity and its uses as Mr. Musk does. But the fact is if we don't have a place where we can vet information, where people can use their real names without being stigmatized, where people can present all of their information and their experiences and begin comparing them to each other so we can find commonality. I don't believe that's going to be something we can expect to come from the government anytime soon. I think we're going to need to do that ourselves.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If you were to venture to guess, in your experience, with all of the things that you've seen, both in your professional life and your personal life, what do you think this whole phenomenon is?
I'm one of those folks that's unfortunately fascinated by the past, fascinated by the anomalies in our history, especially when it comes to megalithic architecture. And I'm not talking specifically about the pyramids for anybody who might want to immediately throw that out. There's a lot of anomalies in our past, and when taken with our myth, with our legend, with our religions, something has been influencing us. Something has been visiting us. Now, whether whether the universe is as vast and populated as some people may like to say, I don't know. It seems like there's some different phenotypes that keep popping up and different morphologies that keep popping up. I can see where those are interwoven into our myths as well. So I have a hard time assigning any direct origin to it, other than I think it's present. I think it's a phenomenon that presents a face to us that it wants to. It seems to have been able to manipulate perception over the years, because as I've said, this isn't brand new. We have a good 80-year investigation of it in the public eye and in the classified system. And the fact is as time has gone by, we've watched the perception of the technology change almost commensurate with pop culture. So that, to me, that speaks less of the invalidity of the the witness, and more of a commonality across the board of some kind of manipulation of perception, or perhaps the fact that, again, our perception, how we perceive things, is based on experience and based on patterns that our brain builds. They've trained brains of animals in the laboratory with moving dots, where they'll train them to get a reward when they see dots moving down. And then they will remove the neuron that is capable of sensing that dot moving down. But because they want so badly to get that reward, the brain will find another way to mimic the idea that the dots are going down so they can send the same signal and get the reward, when in fact no dots went down. They actually went up. So that experiment is something that shows us that it's a little piece of evidence to show us that what we see is not what we always get. So it doesn't surprise me that over 80 years what this looks like has changed. I think it's a single source phenomenon. When I say single source, I mean I think if nothing else, it may not be a geopolitical single source, but I think that there is a level of technology and fundamental understanding that's being utilized here.
And the thing you have to wonder too, with this phenomenon exhibiting signature management, perception manipulation, and it's really operating in a stealthy way without revealing its intent. That's where, for me personally, I go, well, maybe this isn't a good thing. On the flip side of it, as you said, nothing significant that we know of has happened to us in a negative fashion. But thoughts on that?
I agree. There's a lot of logical fallacies involved in this, and there's a lot of things that folks within the zeitgeist like to preach. There's a subset of folks that believe that everything visiting us is friendly and here to help us, and that they're very concerned about the environment and nuclear proliferation. Now, it doesn't seem like they, as I've said before, they didn't stop any of our nuclear testing that I'm aware of, and as far as I know, haven't deactivated, with the exception of a couple of very interesting cases. But not in a way that they could. Doesn't seem like they've deactivated our arsenals. That doesn't seem like they have stopped us in any way from polluting the environment further. And so those things I find to be logical fallacies, that something with a capability that allegedly exhibits a moral structure that, pardon me, I don't like this word, but is willing to abduct people, because we're going to have to get to the bottom of that experience.
Absolutely.
You've got your subset of people who think it's absolutely only assigned to nefarious humans, etc. I think nature is red in tooth and claw. I see no reason to look one level above me and assume that they've all attained enlightenment. It's such a muddy pool. I will say this, that applying positivity, leaning into grace, trying to understand what love means and how we take care of each other has probably provided me more insight and understanding to this than anything else. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's required to operate the technology.
I completely agree. It's interesting. You hear this quite a bit. People talking about it's your sort of mental state. If you're putting out negative energy, you're going to have one experience. If you're coming from a place of peace and love, that you may have a different one. So let's move on from this, and I want to dig into what is currently going on with and really this seems to have blown up, obviously, with what happened with yourself and Lou Elizondo and Fravor. That really seemed to get the ball rolling. But what has really been the sort of bombshell that happened is this guy David Grush, who's come out of nowhere. Now, folks have heard me describe his story probably more than they'd like to. I'd love to hear your take on it. So let's say someone that's watching the show for the first time and has not heard anything about David Grush, how would you sort of summarize it and give a sort of short brief on who he is, what he is alleging?
Well, David Grush is a highly decorated former service member, now and former member of the intelligence services. He was he volunteered for the UAPTF and was tasked by the UAPTF to investigate this phenomenon to the best of his ability. At the close of his investigation, he had collected a great deal of information, what he felt was a preponderance of evidence that needed to be presented to Congress or the Senate, or to those who were to the upper chain of command. And the fact was, this is my opinion here, it doesn't seem the conduit was there for him to make that information available to the right people, or perhaps the information wasn't taken seriously. I'll allow Mr. Grush to speak on that himself. But we're talking about a man who summoned all of the courage to put his career, his family's livelihood on the line, his credibility, and everything to initiate the whistleblower process. Now, the fact is that whistleblower process was not as robust in the past. So Mr. Grush, I believe, took an opportunity that he saw to do good. But the fact is a lot of people want to discount it as just one man with his opinion and some things that he learned, but that's not what it is. It's a United States intelligence official tasked with an investigation, presented his evidence, and felt that the evidence wasn't taken seriously enough, and then initiated the whistleblower process. We're finding out now that Congress is letting us in on what they've been briefed on, at least up into how large it's been. It's not just a handful of folks. It's not just the Nimitz in 2004. It's not what the debunkers and the other armchair folks that survive on cherry picking this subject want to say it is. The fact is there is a preponderance of evidence and a very large group of well vetted out witnesses. And when I say well vetted out, not all witnesses made their way through the process unscathed. Some were rejected based on various criteria. So we've reached a watershed moment. We have the new language in the National Defense Authorization Act. We have the amazing steps taken by Chuck Schumer.
We're going to get into
frankly,
that.
we have a lot of bipartisan support. So David Grush is an American hero. I hope that this investigation is properly handed over to the right people, and that they crack into it the right way, and Dave gets to go on and live his life without constant scrutiny about being an individual responsible for this information. He is a messenger. He's taken far too many shots already. But there's more Dave Grushes out there, and the whistleblower process is not the most efficient way to get information to the American people and to the world. And I think Congress is starting to understand that.
Do you, in what you know of him, do you have any doubt in what he's saying?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. I trust Mr. Grush as an investigator. The language that he has used makes a lot of sense to me. The things that he has investigated, where they touch the unclassed system, are familiar to me, and they make sense. I agree with his judgment when it came to what should be considered valid and what may not be so. I find his professionalism beyond reproach.
I completely feel the same way. It's going to be interesting to see who else comes forward. Now, we have the House oversight hearings that are due. I think they're going to occur on, I think it's July 26th. Unfortunately, I'll be out of the country and will be missing that. Who else have you heard as possible witnesses? I'm sure Dave Grush is one of them. What are you hearing through the grapevine that you could share?
I don't have any names to offer. I unfortunately am very, for your folks out there, I'm very concerned with operational security of all the witnesses involved and their personal security. Mr. Grush has received, how do I want to put it, threats and intimidating tactics used against him. I believe that the level of witnesses, as I said, were vetted. They're commensurate with Mr. Grush's level of professionalism, Mr. Elizondo's level of professionalism, service members, government, civil servants. But the fact is that the list is, in my opinion, unimpeachable at this point.
I'm really looking forward to it. It is going to be. That's really the one thing I know a lot of us have really been looking forward and waiting for these hearings to be announced. And that has certainly been a huge, huge piece of news. But another really big piece of news just came out Friday. And I'm going to put this up here. So this came from from Senator Chuck Schumer. And essentially it's legislation that Schumer and other bipartisan folks got on board with, Marco Rubio, Gillibrand, Todd Young, Martin Heinrich, and essentially he is introducing legislation to declassify government records related to unidentified anomalous phenomena and UFOs. This is modeled after the JFK Assassination Records and Collection Act as an amendment to the NDAA. I mean, this is really pretty big if you think about it, right? This is the head Democrat on the Senate side, Senate leadership.
I am highly optimistic at that language, and I'm highly optimistic as to what we will achieve via that process. However, I'd be remiss if I didn't discuss the fact that when we look at what we learned from the JFK investigation, in the end, really all we got was an Oliver Stone movie. We still don't really understand everything that happened. If anything else, the declassification of that information has muddied the waters and opened up new avenues of investigation for people, and I don't want to see us go down that same road. I think what we're going to see here is that what we're dealing with is not a single point event that someone is trying to prove occurred or not, or whom the plaintiffs and witnesses and victims were. This is actually something that's occurring over a swath of a very large portion of the population. So the good thing about this is as the information comes out, I think the people are going to fly their BS flags on this. We are a relatively well-educated cadre that's very interested in this subject. Maybe the general public may still apply a stigma or find it to be entertainment. But the people very ensconced in this subject we're very positive as to how real it is. So there's a lot of information we get to drive around and skip when it comes to trying to wrap our heads around it. It's a tough spot, Matt. It really seems like we've got about everything we can look at these days is split down the middle 50-50. It really doesn't matter what subject it is. You can line about the same amount of people up on either side of it. And I'm curious how involved that is with the phenomenon, to be honest with you.
I've wondered the same thing. If you think about that it can influence, that it has perception management, if you want to call it that, or influence how people view it, and have such an effect on a large swath of the population, you have to ask yourself, is it steering this? Is it a sort of a guiding hand? And then you have to ask, is it steering it in a good way or not? I wanted to read a little bit from what Schumer had to say on this, which I found was really interesting. So Senator Schumer said here, for decades, many Americans have been fascinated by objects mysterious and unexplained, and it's long past time they get some answers. The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. We are not only working to declassify what the government has previously learned about these phenomena, but to create a pipeline for future research to be made public. I'm honored to carry on the legacy of my mentor and dear friend Harry Reid, and his fight for transparency that the public has long demanded surrounding these unexplained phenomenon. I, of course, we've heard of Tim Burchett, the good work that Senator Gillibrand, who's been on our show, has done, Marco Rubio, and others, but I had no idea. Schumer's, he's kind of like this dark horse that's come out of the blue, but it sure sounds like he knows what's going on. I can't imagine he's not read into this. Any thoughts on that? Because he's, Gang of 8, right?
I have to agree with you. I don't believe that his courage of conviction in his statement just comes from the fact that he's a successful politician. This would not be a survivable faux pas for Chuck Schumer or for the Democratic Party. Neither would it be for the Republican Party. with the support that they've had, that they're offering. This is while I can argue this point back and forth about how bipartisan or nonpartisan it will become, at the moment it does seem like a dual effort on people that have seen the information, that have been privy to the wealth of data. And the fact is I think that that's only going to increase. I think we're going to see the numbers across the aisle increase in support for this. Senator Schumer's absolutely right. Everything he said there is frankly, I hope it goes on a plaque someday.
I do too. So Senator Mike Rounds, we'll talk about on the Republican side, that he stated that our goal is to assure credibility with regard to any investigation or record keeping of materials associated with unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAPs. Relevant documents related to this issue should be preserved, providing a central collection location and reputable review board to maintain the records adds to the credibility of any future investigations. So much in the same way that you were talking about earlier with deck logs disappearing from the incident that you were involved with, it really sounds like that they're going after this in making sure, and I understand that this is under NARA, I'm blanking on the name, National Archives, sorry. They're saying, look, everybody needs to turn in what they have regarding UAPs, UFOs. It goes to NARA, and then this group is going to operate under the assumption that these should be released, and then it sounds like they have to then prove that no, it needs to remain classified. But it sounds like they're pretty wise to what has been going on.
It does seem like, as we like to say in the military, a good sight picture has been offered to them. I think that I can't imagine a politician that would miss the opportunity to be the disclosure guy once he saw that it was real. And so the fact that these folks are not turning around and immediately making blanket statements, but are providing a rational and scientific acumen to this, I think is smart. Whatever this is, there's a learning curve. And there's been a learning curve for leadership. There's been a learning curve for investigators. There's going to be a learning curve for the public. And this isn't something that we should take our education from entertainment or from urban myth and legend. This is a really pivotal time. The way that we accept whatever this is together and the way that it integrates into our reality, because I don't think that as a species we're going to accept that this will be present but misunderstood any longer. But whatever this is, it has to mean the same thing for 8 billion of us. It can't just be the American story or the Western story or the Northern Hemisphere or something like that. And the benefits of this technology and the benefits of the information that may or may not have been classified for 80 years needs to be shared with the whole world.
How do you think the population writ large would react to, let's say, President Biden coming in front of a podium and saying, look, we are being interacted with every day by a non-human intelligence? Do you think we as a country, let alone a species, are ready for that? How do you think that the everyday American will process that?
I'm going to kind of put my foot in my mouth for a second when I said that we shouldn't look to entertainment. But it makes me think of the movie Independence Day. And when though satire and though just entertainment, different people had different responses to what people call truth. If the president said tomorrow that as you said, non-human intelligence is present or has been, a great deal of those millions of folks that you and I were talking about that call themselves experiencers are going to assign value to what he said and try to make that correspond to their experiences. And the thing is we just don't have enough information yet. And that all of us did that. We're obviously not all experiencing the same thing. Different shape, color, size, flavor, speed, time, however you want to put it. I think a lot of people will accept it. I think a lot of people won't. I think a lot of people will jump to the conclusions based on their personal religions or beliefs, and others won't. Would they respond in a resounding negative fashion, I think we would see that kind of response in places, because we get that kind of response in places and from folks that at far less important moments in history. So, see, for me, what it comes down to is that we're at the pinnacle of our science at the moment. And we're looking at a phenomenon that seems to outstrip us by 100 to 1,000 years, at least in the public record. Who knows what we have studied in the last 80 years, and who knows what's studied before then. But what we're dealing with is something that can change the entire world. And if these non-human intelligence are not coming from a planet like our own within the physical universe that we inhabit, because those distances are quite vast, then it speaks to a universe that we have nearly no understanding of other than at a mathematical level. And the folks that describe that math to us the best don't describe these as places where other people should be inhabiting. So we're looking at aspects of our self. We're looking at aspects of our reality. We're tiptoeing up to the idea that we may be more than just this body, and that there are things involved with this technology that have to do with whatever we are when we are not this body. Those are heavy, heavy concepts. And we seem a very young and confused species. None of us agree on the source of consciousness. None of us agree on the source of goodness and grace. And a lot of us believe that if you're not in the exact same circle that we're in, that you must be the bad guys. I have my days I'm optimistic for all of us, and I have my days that I'm not.
How do you think the phenomenon will respond to a sort of mass revelation or public revelation by our government officials, or whoever, if you want to call that? Any thoughts on that? That's something I've kind of pondered here and there.
Well, I think the question remains is, if that phenomenon is a single source, does it wish to remain hidden? Why has it shown itself to only some individuals? It's a good question. Part of me, I have no indications that we've made contact. I have no rumor like that or anything like that. But part of me hopes to a very large extent that at some level this is understood and managed by everyone that knows what's going on. But I don't know how the phenomenon will react. I can't assign any intent or motive to anything I've studied over the past 5 years from other people's cases and from my own, other than things that, frankly, Matt, I don't want to crack open those can of worms on the show today.
I completely understand. Going back to the politics of this, it really seems that for this to move forward for the good of the country, this must remain a bipartisan issue, that it can't go down the partisan path.
I completely agree, and I've been spouting that from the beginning. I try not to espouse any personal politics. I believe in inclusiveness, and I believe in the rights of the individual. But we have a cultural split in our politics in this country, and certain things can be attributed to that cultural split. A higher rate in belief in science on the left, a higher rate in belief in faith on the right could be an easy way to split that for the argument for the moment. I've found that the belief in faith leads many to accept aspects of the phenomenon more quickly and easy than those who have a background in science. And I do understand that, because the science is the most elusive and, frankly, if classified, the most classified part of this. It seems to be the philosophy and consciousness aspects that the government has just let folks run rampant with, and hasn't seemed to have gotten too involved in that. Go ahead. No, please continue. I was about to say something, but I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought. Well, I was looking at the numbers based on the recent vote, and I think that's the kind of thing we can understand there. It was there was a lower number of folks on the left. They didn't support the majority leader in the way a lot of people thought. And I think that speaks volumes to the academia in the United States and in the West, and to those who are going to be looked to for answers as subject matter experts. We just saw Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of poo-poo all over the subject yet once again. It's not in his best interest, nor in others, Seth Shostak, et cetera, not to call folks' names out, but their livelihood is at stake. They've said that this was wrong for years. They're going to have to tiptoe up to the learning curve, just like a lot of people. And I think we're going to watch that happen in our politics. I think you're going to see people, as you and I have said, it must remain bipartisan. And that's at the political level in Washington. But people are no doubt going to ascribe their own values and their own beliefs to this. And I think the politicization of it within the public is going to be the hardest part.
I completely agree. And hopefully our politicians will be a model, and they usually aren't, but a model for bipartisanship on this particular issue. And the one thing I would suggest everybody do is go and look up this NDAA amendment. It's like 62 or 63 pages long. And it really had some interesting things in there. For instance, it uses the term non-human intelligence 23 times in the 63 pages. It defines non-human intelligence as any sentient, intelligent, non-human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy what's in there. I think it was Jeremy Corbell that said this thing's almost like a nuclear bomb that went off. All of this stuff that's in there. One of the things that I thought was interesting is apparently it's got an eminent domain clause. So let's say Lockheed Martin has a craft, because they do. The federal government has eminent domain over that property. But I mean, yeah, it is just wild. 63 pages of this stuff. Do you think that it's going to get watered down? I know it has to go through committees, or do you think that it'll remain largely intact when it finally makes it into the final language that would go into the 24 NDAA?
I believe the initial wording that we see is very smart. I think that it shows me that this is being taken very seriously. They avoided buzzwords, whether people like it or not. The fact is we have to come up with new words for these things because all the other words have stigma attached to them. Non-human intelligence is the proper way to talk about this, because if we're being real, let's even assume that we have been told where they're from by them, that's just their take on it. Unless they left a breadcrumb trail back to their planet or their place of origin that we can verify, we would only be if whatever we're dealing with that has hidden itself from us may be lying. So I like that the language leaves room for our investigation, for the truth to be pulled out, not the zeitgeist. Watered down, I've seen people claiming that the fact that there's a 25-year scope on some of this, they're trying to say, yeah, whatever, tune in next week. That's because they want you to get you to listen to them and not to pay attention to the fact that people are taking this seriously. That if they weren't taking it seriously, they just would have dropped that bomb on all of us and then made us figure it out. And they would. I'm sure that sociologists and economists and other people smarter than I have sat down at some point and have some model for this kind of paradigm shift, and want to ensure continuity of operations for all of us. The lights need to stay on, the cops need to arrive, the firemen need to show up when someone yells fire. And these ideas we can't put that on pause while we all wrap our heads around something like this. So I think that they're doing it the right way. A lot of opportunity there to fail over a protracted period of time like that.
That's for sure. One bit that was in the Democratic statement that I would like to read, which really I think kind of shines a light onto the intent of this thing. sort of paraphrasing a little bit here, the UAP reporting from all of our military and intelligence officials and other quote unquote credible sources, official sources, we'll just say, led some in Congress to believe that the executive branch was concealing important information regarding UAPs over broad periods of time. Congress recognizes that these records, if they exist, were likely concealed under the good faith goal of protecting national security. However, hiding that information from Congress and the public at large is simply unacceptable. I would also say it's illegal, too. If these programs are being run without congressional oversight, they're lying to our lawmakers, and they're certainly lying to us, and that's not a democracy.
I completely agree with you. And while I don't mean to point out any villains or anything like that, the fact is that we do deserve to know. We have a constitution. We have a set of checks and balances in place. And if we go back in the past, and if we find that leadership made decisions for our own good, folks, if still around, that can shoulder the accountability will have to be held accountable. But if nothing else, our system has to be held accountable. And so I'm heartened by hearing phrases like eminent domain, because the fact is there should be a level of our government that has eminent domain over the other aspects of that government. And what we're seeing is 80 years of something that slipped outside of that domain and operated on its own somehow. This is a slippery slope. If we don't accept responsibility as a country for what individuals, industry, or past leadership may have done, whether with good intention or not, if we don't draw a line in the sand and take responsibility for this as a mature society, we're just going to keep kicking the ball down the road. We're not going to trust each other, and someone is going to sneak into the kitchen and steal the goods while we're arguing about it.
I also think, too, that not dealing with this head on, and especially issues, which is what I've messaged quite a bit to the people that I chat with on Capitol Hill, is when the news of the amount and the specific types of, and I think probably you and I are aware of what these are, the threats of physical violence against people that are involved in this program. That's not what this country is built on. And if you essentially have a sort of military junta, if you want to call it that, a military commission behind the scenes running the country, that's not America. And it's important, I think, that the executive branch and the Biden administration must take this head on. And for decades, Republican administrations and Democratic administrations have kept this under wraps. And I think President Biden has a unique opportunity to go down in history and do the right thing and turn the page on this finally. I think it's got to happen for the good of the country. So if you don't mind, let's get to some questions here. People, of course, would love to hear your thoughts. So this came from Figgin Schwau 87, butcher that name. Is zoo hypothesis confirmed? I have to admit, I have no idea what zoo hypothesis is. Maybe you do.
I'm going to make a joke, pardon me, but no hypotheses are confirmed, or we'd call them theories.
That's true.
But no. No. I think it's an interesting hypothesis. But for folks who don't know, the idea of a zoo hypothesis would be that this is a garden planet per se, and that we're being tended by something higher for some reason. It's I believe as likely as many other ideas, but unfortunately we have to learn that from them.
Got it. Siddharth Patel asks, why is the ICIG not giving an official comment about David Grush?
I don't know. It's hard to prove a negative. I can't say why anyone would make a declarative statement or not. There's no reason for. Let me put it this way. When a United States Navy sailor like myself comes out, the United States Navy needs to make no comment. My record speaks for itself. My DD-214 states where I've been, and my shadow box has my medals in it. So the Navy doesn't need to make a declarative statement of, yes, Cahill was a Master-at-Arms chief. The fact is that no one's coming out of the woodwork to discredit Mr. Grush. No one who has known him, no one who works in that realm, and no one who understands the corridors of influence in the Beltway is disparaging him in any way whatsoever. Mr. Grush has been taken incredibly seriously.
And he's handled it with class. So there were some debunkers that were pointing out he had said that he is on the spectrum, and we're trying to discredit him that way, which was utterly disgusting. I won't get into that. Okay, from Jeff, question: does Sean have any indication that there are semi-legal reverse engineering programs in addition to deep, black, or rogue programs that engage in highly illegal activity?
Well, I want to be careful with the declarative yes on this, but I want to say that the language he uses is important. I have an unclassified reverse engineering program going on in a notebook over on that table the other day over there. But that joke aside, that's the entry level for working on this. There will be programs. There are local colleges here that are establishing UAP programs. There are national colleges that are establishing areas of study. There are national think tanks that are studying this. I'm involved in a think tank that is studying an aspect of this technology. Now, I think what people are interested in is what's behind the classification system, and it's never going to be as easy as just pulling something from behind a curtain and showing it to people. I know folks. An executive order could do those things. But otherwise, declassifying something is a pain. And we're talking about things that each aspect of something that someone might want to declassify might have 10 or 12 different branches of it, of conclusion that come off that are still germane to national security. And that's the last thing that I have to add to the political piece of this, is whether I like it or not. We have a responsibility to keep the American people safe first. That would mean understanding and dominating the technology before anyone else would. And I think most of us post facto would be happy to be part of that country. The question is what are the motives and intent of our country if they have that level of technology? And the fact is it looks like it should be a gift for the entire planet. I truly fear that we're not ready for this level of technology.
I think that's a pretty common consensus. We've seen how we all tend to behave as a species. Next question from Android Paranormal, who was very generous with the super chat. Thank you, Android, for that. Some people demand journalists reveal all their sources. Can both of you explain why doing it through a democratic process is more beneficial long term? For example, we can't all storm Lockheed, LOL.
The last time anybody stormed anything, it was treason. It shouldn't have been done. Storming is the last resort of a people that are ready to burn their own homes down. Leaks show where there's a problem. They don't relieve the stress that created the leak. So I'm a believer in due process. I think that what we're doing is the right way to do it. I don't think we need any more bombshell leaks or anything like that. But this is where our process, I will be one of those people who always puts the onus on the American people, that we the voter, especially the non-voters, the disinterested voters, we have given up our sovereignty to representative government in a way that I think is incredibly dangerous, especially in this realm. If we as a people decide to let others decide for us, then we're going to let them decide everything for us. If this level of technology is if understood, would dominate a world.
It absolutely would. Again a bunch of Creeman Cider. Who were the plainclothes guys that confiscated all the sensor days from the control room, whatever that means? Brett.
I don't know. I didn't encounter any of them, and it would only be speculation on my part.
Got it. Okay, from Enrico, do you think we are dealing with a malevolent intelligence?
As I've stated lots of times before, and I like the phrase, I believe nature's red in tooth and claw. I believe that the intelligence we're dealing with could be as malevolent or as benevolent as we can.
Got it. Let's see. So from Lisa, study of UAPs. Is anyone investigating the foreign materials exploitation program like the Army's? Not aware of that.
I'm aware of the program. It would make sense to me that things of a non-human intelligence nature would fall under foreign. But unless we have evidence to investigate that program, I think we're making assumptions. We have to gather the evidence. It has to be placed in a narrative that leadership can understand, and then they would go forward and do such an investigation. So I'm not aware of a direct investigation in that unit, no.
Got it. Study of UAPs also asked, do we know if Lewis testifying? I think you sort of touched on that. That's not something you're going to approach. And completely. I don't blame you.
I'm not a journalist or a leaker. I have no dog in the fight other than the record.
Understood. Lucy 8M, are there physical sensations? This is a really great question. Are there physical sensations related to the hitchhiker effect? I've never had anyone ask that one.
For some people. For myself, there have been, when encountering the phenomenon, a feeling of effervescence in my body, a bubbling, a buzzing, a vibration, ringing in the ears on occasion. They're disconcerting in the fact that there's no pattern to them and they come and go with the phenomenon. So it was something that I would bring up to, that I did research on and brought up with medical professionals I was working with. It didn't appear that I had any kind of physical or neurological condition that would be commensurate with those things. So yes, a lot of people do report physical feelings as if encountering some kind of sonic, energetic, or vibrational field.
Completely makes sense. I've sort of had something similar, although my ears ring all the time, so I wouldn't know if there was something different. I'll tell you that story. It had to do with me being on the Nimitz when a Hornet did a cat shot. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that experience offline.
I know that thing.
Yeah. Let's just say hearing protection is really, really important when that happens. William Martin O'Keefe, a question: Does Sean think Congress will tell us if they find UAP?
Yes, I do. I think we've definitely crossed the Rubicon on whether or not we'll accept a non-answer going forward, and I think Congress has the message.
Walker Dale question: Are there another really great question? Are there any efforts being made to help people deal with the ontological shock?
I am personally involved in an effort that I think will result in a great deal of community involvement, community support, a place where folks can get together to really share some of these earth-shaking paradigms with each other. I do believe that I know of a few efforts that are quite concerned with that. It's something that's very close to me. I've experienced my own version of ontological shock, and I'm on my way back from it. I know how it feels. It's a scary place to be when you're questioning the very foundation of your beliefs and in reality. And I think we need to be very careful and very, very inclusive in letting folks tell their stories at a certain point. Every one of us will need to, at some point, say what we remember and what happened for us to understand what happened to all of us.
That definitely resonates with me. I mean, I can tell you, as I said before, I'd never had anything happen. And once I started seeing things, and I think the more disturbing aspect of sort of poltergeist stuff happening in the house, man, I have to tell you, I had many a conversation with my therapist about just the level of anxiety. And, when you see this stuff, it throws you because it's, it's something you're not used to used to seeing. I'll just say that, and I'm perfectly happy never seeing anything else again. I've seen enough. Thank you, Drive Through. I'm done. So, how can people support what you're currently working on and follow what you're doing? What's the best way for people to keep up with you?
Well, to keep up with me, it would be my handle at Twitter is @mintyhyperspace. My Gmail is mintyhyperspace@gmail.com. I'm really lousy at return correspondence. It takes me a while. And I would say this also, if you want to just tell me your story, that's okay, I'll read it. But if with the level of correspondence that I receive, responding is based on whether I am asked for a response or not. Because if I just responded kindly to everybody, I would have a full-time job just writing emails back. But the thing is I want to talk to folks, and we're looking for community leaders, people that are willing to stand up in front and perhaps run a forum, perhaps be there to answer questions, to help with people when they veer towards ontological shock, to help people when they don't know where to go. We're looking for folks that are willing to help with that. So while I can't announce any projects or partnerships just yet, the people that really want to get out there and get into the human aspect of this, to have that sense of community and inclusiveness, to remove the stigma, to not just blanket believe anything anybody tells you, but to give everybody a chance to describe what they experienced or what they perceived. We're going to need those folks more than ever. And so if you guys make yourselves known, I promise you that somebody will be following along behind to cash in on that support.
I love that. I do want to ask one last question. A longtime supporter of ours who's very well known, Nicole Sackich, asked, "Hi, Sean. Can you expand on your time spent at the Monroe Institute?"
I can. It was about a week we were there. There were 19 experiencers that were brought together by Dr. David Broadswell. Myself, let's see. Well, I won't name everybody off, but suffice to say that we spent approximately a week there, doing various aspects of the Gateway or Monroe technique interface, which is a means of utilizing what are called binaural beats to produce a certain brainwave frequency, which then you can entrain your brain to follow along. And those brainwave frequencies are indicative of sleep, lucid dream, what some call astral projection, when we're getting into the stranger aspects of the experience there, but aspects of consciousness that most of us have touched a little bit on in our lives, but don't necessarily spend a lot of time studying, so to speak. In and around the Monroe Institute, they had random number generators that were measuring whether our ability during these experiments were affecting the random number generators. I can say that was true. We were actually really spiking the RNGs that they had. They said it was pretty impressive to see. We attempted what others would call CE5, although I don't recognize that term as one of the original close encounter scales. But what it is essentially is human-initiated attempts at contact via meditation and intent. It's my opinion, and the opinion of most of the folks that I was speaking to, that we were unsuccessful. But I do have to say that during the course of that week, a lot of people had very profound experiences. You can probably chalk that up to getting away for a week, putting the technology in the drawer, eating healthy food, and being around awesome people, which I'm sure is foundational to that. But all of us, I shouldn't say all of us, many of us who had some experience with this in the past had experience with interesting aspects of consciousness, and without any negativity, and without any sense of danger or anything like that. I would, while the fact that the Monroe Institute had a previous relationship with the Central Intelligence Agency will turn some folks off. Frankly, I think in a lot of ways that adds a bona fide to it, that they were interested enough in what was going on to spend time there, and to get involved in it. The fact is aspects that the Monroe Institute studies are something that you have to study for yourself. You can't read it in a book. You can't have it told to you by somebody else. It is a personal experience, and it's an experience in consciousness. Like a lot of things that I've experienced with the phenomenon, I can't prove something that's only occurred in consciousness to another human being, and I accept that. So we had a great time. I consider all of those people that I was there with a good friend. I don't agree with everybody. We don't share the same beliefs and everything, or as to what this phenomenon was, but one thing we were all certain about was that every one of us was sure that the key to understanding this is not through anger, not through negativity, but it's through openness and love and grace, which frankly is a turnoff for a lot of people.
Wow. Yeah, I had heard a little bit about this place, but I had no idea. Yeah. So I have to tell you, probably I think it was like an hour into it before we let you go here. You've had this black Tic Tac flying around behind you. It actually flew in front of you several times. It looked pretty large, but it's been buzzing around behind you. I thought it was very, very funny. But it does look black and oval. It was very.
It's a housefly.
I think you might have a pretty large.
My window's open for the cat.
It's a good size, but it got pretty close to the camera. Anyway, Sean, thank you so much for coming on, man. I've been a fan of yours for a very, very long time. I've listened to pretty much everything that you've had to say since I became interested in this phenomenon. So I'm really grateful for you coming on, and look forward to having you back, and look forward to hearing what is next for you. So that's fantastic. Folks, thanks for joining us. Again, if you enjoy our show, please tell your friends about us. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe, all that kind of stuff that the YouTube algorithm loves. It's what gets YouTube to sort of organically promote our content and spread the word on this really important subject. Sean, thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon.